G'day, how you going? Yeah, there was just lots of things that I did during my run yesterday and leading up to my run and all that sort of stuff. And I just thought I'd share with everyone. And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I can honestly say that without the podcast and without some of the guests that are on the podcast over the last, I'll just turn my phone off, over the last 2 or 3 months, with Letty's podcast and the guests and the podcast I got onto Brodie Sharp's podcast. I've changed a lot of stuff in regards to my first marathon in December. One of the first things I changed was I felt I was looking at relying a lot on my zones, and wasn't really believing. There's a bit of bias towards only believing what my Garmin was saying when I wanted to believe it. So what was happening is I was feeling a lot better and able to run, and my Garmin was telling me that I was in zone 3, zone 4, and I was running and I was having conversations with people on the phone. And really, if you're in zone 3, zone 4, by what I've learned is you shouldn't be able to have conversations on the phone. That's more your easy run, which is more your zone 1 and zone 2s. So this led me to think that my zones weren't actually accurate to my level of fitness. So I can't remember, the guy that was on Letty's podcast was talking about just basically doing 180 less your age. And that's around about where you should be for your easy runs. So that, coupled with finding out that you could actually use your resting heart rate to calculate your zones. So then I got to onto Garmin, and you could actually punch in your resting heart rate, and then it would line your zones up according to what your resting heart rate was. And as far as I could determine, your resting heart rate is going to be a good determination of your level of fitness, not just your age, 180 less your age, 220 less your age, because really that would just be like an average. So then I thought, well, if I did it calculated on my resting heart rate through Garmin, and then that would give me a truer idea of where my zones are. So that, and what I also got onto, instead of a program for marathon training that was all about the amount of kilometers, it was an under 3.5 hour. You're aiming for 3.5 hours for your marathon, and what you did was it was all based on X amount of time in your heart rate zones. So using a different way to calculate my heart rate zones, and then running, instead of going for a 30-kilometer run, for instance, the direction was to run for 3 hours in zone 1 or 2, okay? And as far as I could determine, that will be a truer, more accurate way of building your fitness. That, coupled with what I'd heard so many times on the podcast in relation to having an 80% of the time you should be in that zone 1 and 2, and only 20% of the time you should be doing faster runs, and calculating your heart rate zones, my heart rate zones differently. This whole time I trained for this marathon was completely different. Okay, so that being that, I only did the Melbourne Marathon the 12th of December, so therefore I only had until 20th of February, and that was the date. Obviously yesterday I did the marathon. Then it was only about 7 or 8 weeks after recovering from my Melbourne Marathon that I had worth of training. So what I did is I jumped in around about that time and did a lot of the training 7 or 8 weeks out from this marathon based on the feel and the zones rather than the kilometres. So that was different. But about 2 weeks before, so about 2.5 weeks ago, I think it was, I woke up and lo and behold, the old getting out of bed and the bottoms of your feet and the arches of your feet, and you just go, oh no, plantar fasciitis. I've had it before, and it just so happened that I'd just been listening to Brody's podcast, which is amazing. Aussie bloke, Brody Sharp, and introduced, of course, by Letty, and talked about, I've got to try and not say as much. He talked about how to manage and adjust your training according to your injuries. Because initially what I didn't want to do is just stop running altogether. So I just sort of stopped for one day and then went for a smaller run. It was still playing up. Wasn't as terrible as it could be, but it seemed like it could get worse and worse, as plantar does. So it just so happened around about that time, I listened to Brody about what happens a lot is people completely stop running altogether. So it suited me to do what he said, and that was to actually run a little bit, so not go nuts and do a big run because I had the starting plantar fasciitis. Actually go for a run and then gauge the next day if it was worse or the same or a little bit better, and then base my next day's run or any exercise at all on how it felt. So I wasn't going to go out and go crazy 3 or 4 hours or something like that. I wasn't at that level of training. I was coming down and doing a taper anyway. So what then happened, instead of, say, if it started to be a little bit worse because I was carefully still running, what I would do is just switch it over to the bike. I ended up having, instead of doing a long run, I actually jumped on the exercise bike that I've got, and I said again. Oh no, I'm saying too much. I was on there for 3 hours to do my long run, but on the bike. Going up and down, taking a day's break here, taking 2 days break there, and measured the level of pain as I was getting out of bed each morning. That would then determine what exercise I would do that day and how much I would do if I did any. How it worked out was I ended up 2 days before, and because I was gauging it, according to the level of pain when I got out of bed in the mornings, and not afraid to actually go a couple of days without running at all, the second last day, I had, I think, a tiny little bit of pain. Then I decided, a couple of days before that, I decided to carb load. So that fitted in nicely with not exercising, because the 3-day carb load has you, what I found on the internet, carb loading for 3 days, and basically to get that build up for that endurance type nutrition, you don't exercise at all. So that fitted in nicely with that. So I was basically eating, I weighed just about 80 kilograms. So I had to eat 800 grams of carbohydrates 3 days in a row, which was pretty full on. But it worked out good, because on the day, I didn't bonk at do 5, do 6, do 7, do 8 Ks. So Letty said in a comment, luck's got nothing to do with it, because I said, wish me luck on the post. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learnt with marathon running. There's no luck. It's all based on your training and your mindset. And you also can't bullshit your way through a marathon. So you can't just fake it. It is the absolute truth. What you've trained and how strong your mind is how good you will go in that marathon. You can't cheat. You can't. Yeah, that was awesome. Few things from the day itself. that I really want to share was, it's a bit like the Matrix. You to know what the Matrix is, you need to experience. You hear people say that the mind games, or it's a test of the mind. And it's mindset and all that sort of stuff. But one thing I really found yesterday was that I was at the point of the pain being as real as I was describing it today, like a brick wall in front of you. How am I going to get through that brick wall? You can't go through a brick wall with just your own body and yourself. It's actually impossible. And I was describing it to someone today that it was like my mind was saying to me that the pain was as real as a brick wall in front of you, and there's no way that you can get through that brick wall to go any faster. And that's how real it was. The pain was that real. It's pushing past that and realizing that your mind is just trying to protect you from the pain. And when I realized that when I was running yesterday, that even though my mind was telling me there's no way I could go any faster and there's no way that I could keep going at the pace I was or increase the pace I was going, I could. It was nuts. And one of the biggest things, I haven't really heard anyone say anything about this, but it's something I learnt during the run yesterday, and that was that I was using people, instead of slipping in behind them and using them to pace me, I'd do that for a little bit, but then what would happen is the people in front of me, they might be doing the pace that I want to do, but then they'd slip back a little bit. So they might be doing 5 minutes and I was trying to stick to 5 minutes a K. And then they'd go to 5.5 and 5.10. I'll be like, okay, well, I can't keep going like this. And if I sit beside behind these people and forget that they're going a little bit slower and don't keep track of it, I'll lose too much time. So even though I was in the zone in regards to my pace and what they were doing, I needed to pass them. So what happened then is I used them to boost me. So what I did is I pick up my pace, even though I felt I shouldn't probably, and the pain in my body was saying you shouldn't be going faster, this is the pace you need to be going. I'd push past that and go around them. But because I didn't want them to pass me again, and I didn't want to create a hassle for them having to pass me, I would then have to increase my speed. So I'd have to up it again for enough time that I was going to get as far ahead as possible to be able to sit comfortably away from them, so they wouldn't be a concern to me anymore in regards to them. Not that I was trying to beat them, I just didn't want to be awkward for them to try and pass me again. So it was sort of like I was getting them to boost me off, which I did about 3 times during the run yesterday. So that was excellent. I also didn't, the first run I really kept my eye on my heart rate and my pace, but this time around I based it all on feel. So I based it on how my breathing was, how my body felt, and I knew at all times that if I started breathing really heavily or if I started labouring a lot, that I was probably going over what I could actually maintain for the whole run. And then the second thing that I'd look at, or the third thing I'd think of, would be my pace or my heart rate. But my first thing was feel. My first marathon, my first thing was heart rate and pace. So this time when I ran, it was all based on feel, which is, you'll all probably say, yes, that's how you always do it. But, realizing it yourself during the race and knowing your body more each time, you can be more accurate when you're actually doing that. And I feel a lot more accurate doing that now. A big thing that I learned in Melbourne when I started coming into the 35, 36 kilometre mark was I was in a lot of pain. legs are in pain, quite fatigued. Not cardio fine, I got great cardio, but the pain was coming on and my legs were sort of shutting down. And in Melbourne, I realised, like, I stopped and walked for a little bit, but the pain didn't go away. So it's like, well, I might as well keep running. So I realised that this time. So I'm running and the pain was there. I'm like, well, I'm not going to stop, and I might as well speed up because the pain's still going to be there. And what I did quite often was I'd speed up and then stick to a pace and go, it's the same amount of pain as it was before. So I might as well be faster and be in the same pain than slower and be in the same pain. So that was really good. That was something I learned. And like I said, you guys know all this stuff, but anyway, I just thought I'd share. At about the 20k mark, I started to get quite sore. My plantar fasciitis, like I could feel it starting to creep in. And I was listening to an audio book, and I listened to the same audio book last time in Melbourne as well, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. He's like, I've listened to the book about 6 or 7 times, and I timed it to start at a good spot at the marathon, but I never thought that the moment that my right arch started playing up, and I started thinking, oh wow, either this is gonna keep building and then I'm not gonna be able to walk, or I put up with the pain. I thought, tomorrow I'm gonna be in pain anyway. And at that moment, when I was listening to the audio book, I kid you not, at that moment, David Goggins was talking about he had broken bones in his fractured feet when he was doing Hell Week. And I swear he said about carrying injuries. He was talking about someone carrying an injury, and then he said about ultra runners having plantar fasciitis, and he knows millions of ultra runners that have plantar fasciitis, and they just keep running. And as soon as I heard that, I'm just like, I'll just keep going, and I'll have just put up with the pain. And seriously, probably 2 or 3 Ks after that, it drifted away anyway. So that was really interesting. A really good thing that I did too was I did a song list of about 6 heavy metal songs that I really, really love and really get me really pumped up. And about the 39k mark, I switched it over to these songs, and I'll tell you what, they gave me a boost the last few Ks. But yeah, look, I thought I'd share all that stuff. Very excited about my times yesterday, but some of those things, you guys will probably know all about those things, but just in case you didn't, I can tell you one thing for sure. Without Letty's podcast, I would not have done as well, absolutely anywhere near as well as I did, because I changed everything according to what I've been listening to. And it's not just about what Letty has on there and the information, it's about how it's delivered, because a lot of that stuff, I've read that stuff before, but in the way it's delivered and explained and how Letty asks the questions, just simply describing what she wants to know, and the guests saying it in a way that I understand. And I mean, mind you, I might listen to the podcast 3 or 4 times before I actually get it as well. But yeah, look, it's awesome. Thank you very much. Love the group. Hopefully I didn't waffle on too much. Well, I did waffle on too much. But anyway, thanks for everything. Love it all. Love the podcast. Love Speed Striders Facebook group. Onwards and upwards.